Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, the Korean government immediately initiates measures to shake up Korea's safety system and regulations following President Park Geun-hye's nationally televised address on the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. President Park is in the United Arab Emirates to attend an event marking the installment of a nuclear reactor that Korea is building for the Gulf nation. Plus, Russia claims it has ordered soldiers deployed in regions near Ukraine to return to their home bases. The US says it's seen no indication Russian troops are moving away from the border. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, May 20th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. 34 days have passed now since the Sewol-ho ferry sank off Korea's southwestern coast, taking with it the lives of hundreds of people, many of whom were high school students. On Monday, President Park Geun-hye made a tearful apology for the disaster and laid out a range of measures to make Korea, hopefully, a safer country. Chae-yu-sun starts us off.
이번 사고에 제대로 대처하지 못한 최종 책임은 대통령인 저에게 있습니다.
For the first time since the Sewol-ho ferry accident last month, President Park directly apologized to the nation. It came amid criticism of her previous apologies, as many people felt she wasn't taking full responsibility as the head of state. Saying that the Coast Guard had failed to fulfill its duties in swiftly attending to the passengers of the sinking ferry, President Park said she was dissolving the organization.
국가안전처를 만들어 각 부처에 분산된 안전 관련 조직을 통합하고 지휘 체계를 일원화해서 육상과 해상에서 일어나는 모든 유형의 재난에 현장 중심으로 대응할 수 있는 체제를 만들겠습니다.
President Park also talked about cutting off ties between the public sector and private entities. Claims of cronyism between the two have been blamed for the government's insufficient and lax handling of the disaster. She suggested tripling the number of public organizations and affiliates that are barred from employing retired public employees and extending the period after which retired workers can return to the workforce. Regarding the punishment of those linked to the ferry disaster, the president seemingly took account of what the victims' families requested during a meeting at the presidential office last week.
필요하다면 특검을 해서 모든 진상을 낱낱이 밝혀내고 엄정하게 처벌할 것입니다. 그리고 여야와 민간이 참여하는 진상조사위원회를 포함한 특별법을 만들 것도 제안합니다.
As she read out the names of some of the ferry victims, President Park said that she will not leave their deaths in vain and designate April 16, the day of the sinking, as a day to remember their sacrifices. Chae-yu-sun, Arirang News.
And the government initiated follow-up measures after President Park unveiled her package of remedies to upgrade the country's safety standards and end corruption. These will hopefully ensure another disaster like the Sewol-ho ferry sinking does not happen again in the future. At a meeting presided over by Presidential Chief of Staff Ki-choon, the government broke President Park's remedies into 5 main sectors and 27 measures in total. The main sectors are the restructuring of government, reforming how government officials are appointed, as you can see on the screen there, proposing a special law to the National Assembly, authorizing the establishment of a fact-finding committee into the ferry disaster, the establishment of a national safety ministry, and the establishment of a monument and a People's Safety Day on April 16th, the day of the ferry disaster. And on the investigation front, prosecutors say they're done playing games with the de facto owner of the sunken ferry operator, who has so far denied, just flat out ignored, court summons. A special team is now in place to bring in Yoo Byung-on by the end of this week. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Prosecutors looking for the elusive practical owner of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry say they will make all effort to bring him in by week's end. In a briefing held Sunday, the leader of the Sewol-ho investigation task force said a special squad of more than 40 detectives would be formed to track Yoo Byung-hun down and arrest him. He said Yoo and his family have mocked the government and challenged authority in defying orders to come in for questioning. The 73-year-old is suspected of tax evasion and embezzlement of millions of dollars from company affiliates owned by him and members of his family. Prosecutors believe his illegal actions contributed to the sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry. Yoo is presumed to be holed up inside a religious compound his family owns in Gyeonggi-do province. The area is currently surrounded by supporters of Yoo who are blocking off authorities from entering. The prosecution has said it is considering raiding the compound. Arrest warrants for Yoo's second son and eldest daughter, both of whom are residing abroad, have been issued after the two failed to appear for questioning. Yoo's eldest son, who was involved in the day-to-day operations of the company that owned the Sewol-ho ferry, has also refused to cooperate with prosecutors. His whereabouts are unknown. Over a month has passed since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized off the southwestern coast of Korea. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the North Korean nuclear issue and an upcoming trip by Chinese President Xi Jinping to Seoul is expected to top the agenda when China's foreign minister touches down in the South Korean capital next week. For talks, Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit Seoul next Monday for talks with his South Korean counterpart Yoon Byung-se as the two countries seek to put a stop to North Korea's nuclear ambitions. On top of the agenda will be fine-tuning the details of Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul. Xi is expected to make his first trip to South Korea since becoming president in the coming months. Although a specific date has not been set, South Korean government officials say the summit may take place in the first half of this year. Another pending issue on the table will be the possibility of a fourth nuclear test by North Korea. While North Korea appears ready to conduct a test at any time, Beijing may use Wang's visit to send a clear message to Pyongyang that its nuclear ambitions will not be tolerated and could result in stronger sanctions. At the same time, it could reiterate the need for dialogue to settle tensions on the Korean peninsula. Beijing and Seoul during Wang's visit may also exchange opinions about Japan's denial of history and its push for collective self-defense. Both nations, major victims of Tokyo's past militarism, have voiced concerns over the Abe administration's pursuit to revise its pacifist constitution without fully recognizing the country's wartime atrocities. The revision would allow Japan to come to the defense of an ally under attack, a revival of bitter World War II memories for the two nations. During his two-day stay, the Chinese diplomat is also scheduled to visit with President Park Geun-hye and Presidential Security Advisor Kim Jang-soo. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea's nuclear and missile programs will make up the bulk of talks in Singapore later this month between the defense chiefs of South Korea, the US and Japan. South Korea's defense ministry says Kim Kwan-jin, Chuck Hagel and Itsunori Onodera will meet on May 31st on the sidelines of the 13th Asia Security Summit. Although details will be finalized next week, the threat posed by North Korea is expected to lead the discussions. The sharing of military intelligence will also likely be on the table, as Seoul has been pushing for the three sides to sign an MOU on the matter.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, President Park is in the United Arab Emirates for a two-day visit to attend a ceremony to mark the installation of the first Korean-made nuclear reactor in that country. The presidential office in Seoul says this is the first time Korea's nuclear reactor technology and safety will get recognition overseas. Korea and the UAE have agreed to install a total of 4 nuclear plants in the Gulf nation by 2020. Korea hopes to further expand its reach in the global nuclear plant industry by joining hands with the UAE and pave the way for Koreans to find opportunities in the international arena. During the visit, the president will also meet with the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. Despite the ongoing situation surrounding the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, officials say President Park decided to make the short trip in consideration of the future of the two sides' economic cooperation. And President Park's visit to the Gulf at such a sensitive time here in Korea shows how important these nuclear reactor deals are to the country. Seoul hopes to secure even more highly lucrative deals across the region in the coming years. Our Na Hyung-kyung has this report.
Despite criticism about the timing of the trip, President Park is squeezing in a short 2-day visit to the United Arab Emirates starting Monday. It goes to show just how important she and the government regard the joint project in the Arab country. A 1,400-megawatt light water reactor built with Korean technology will be installed in Baraka, west of Abu Dhabi, and President Park will attend a ceremony celebrating the installation of the reactor, which is part of an estimated $40 billion bid Korea won in 2009. The deal includes the construction of 4 nuclear units in the region by the year 2020. Approximately 1,600 Korean workers are currently at the construction site in Baraka, and depending on the progress, Korea is said to be receiving up to nearly $300 million per month from the UAE. The first nuclear unit is not expected to be completed until 2017, but Korean government officials are hoping President Park's visit this week will demonstrate the nation's strong commitment to the project and send a message to other countries that may be considering similar deals with Korea. Saudi Arabia, for example, is looking to generate up to 20% of its electricity needs through nuclear energy by 2030. It plans to do so by building a total of 16 nuclear units by the year 2032, with the goal of having the first reactor online in 7 years' time. Vietnam is also looking for a contractor for building nuclear power plants, and with winners of both bids expected to be decided by the end of this year, the state-run Korea Electric Power Corporation is pulling out all the stops to make sure the deals are brought to Seoul. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, if you live overseas or are a foreigner living here in Korea and have tried to purchase goods off Korean websites in the past, you'll be delighted with this next story. From this Tuesday, authentication certificates will no longer be required for online purchases made from abroad. The Financial Services Commission and the Financial Supervisory Service say shoppers will no longer have to go through the arduous process of submitting authentication of one's identification when buying goods in excess of roughly $300. Up until now, internet shoppers had to install ActiveX software on their computer and download a program provided by local financial institutions. The software was a major headache as it did not work on all web browsers and limited access to online shopping. Now, Korea's unemployment rate officially stands at 3.9%, which is an enviable figure compared to many other countries around the world. In reality, however, that figure is very far off the mark. Our Hwang Ji-ae tells us what's behind the discrepancy and how the government plans to address it.
Song Se-jin says he's one of many who've delayed graduation to gain more preparation time to find work. Although he can graduate, he prefers to remain as a student until he lands a job.
I think many of my friends have high scores for English proficiency tests, and they also have different kinds of certificates. So I also took a semester off to prepare for all that.
But Song is not categorized as unemployed in the nation's jobs data. Rather, he's just a student preparing to get a job.
And it's because of people like this that economists look past the official jobless rate to a so-called actual unemployment rate that includes those who are preparing to get a job underemployed or discouraged from finding a job.
Taking them into account, the actual jobless bracket included over 3 million individuals in April, more than 3 times the government's official figure. The actual jobless rate also stands at 11%, up more than 7 percentage points from the unemployment rate announced last month. Statistics Korea, which compiles the jobs data, counts only those who don't have a job despite their efforts to get one, and that means when they actually start filling out applications.
But it has been criticized for many years that it is too narrow a definition to reflect the true state of unemployment and is inclined to underestimate the number of true unemployed.
In response to the criticism, Korea's statistics agency plans to release a new set of data in November which provides jobless figures based on international standards that will include the underemployed and discouraged seekers. It said the extra data would offer a full picture of the nation's job market. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, if you drive a Hyundai car in Korea, then listen up, because Hyundai Motor is recalling more than 120,000 Tucson SUVs over an airbag problem. Korea's Transportation Ministry said Monday that bolts attaching the driver's airbag to the steering wheel may be loose. This latest recall affects Tucson models produced between 2011 and 2013 and comes just 2 days after Hyundai recalled the same vehicle in the US and in Puerto Rico for the same problem. Here in Korea, free repair services will be available at any of the automaker's service centers starting today, Tuesday. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this morning. And for that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Ukraine will hold its presidential elections this coming Sunday, and ahead of it, Russia announced that its forces have begun to pull back from its border with Ukraine. The Kremlin announced on Monday Russian President Vladimir Putin had specifically ordered for troops engaged in planned spring drills to return to their home bases, but the West says it has yet to see any indication of movement. Hours after the apparent conciliatory notice, White House spokesman Jay Carney said such an unkept promise was not new, and NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said while he has yet to see signs of a troop withdrawal, he would be the first to welcome it, as it would be a first important contribution to de-escalating the crisis. Tensions continue to batter eastern Ukraine. 24 Ukrainian servicemen have been killed in anti-terrorism operations in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The United States has named 5 Chinese officers of the People's Liberation Army for hacking into American businesses and industrial entities. A grand jury in Pennsylvania, where the companies are based, accused the men of spying and stealing trade secrets that would be beneficial to the victims' competitors in China. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said in some instances the timing of the steal was particularly helpful to certain Chinese companies, while other internal data would have offered a glimpse into strategy and vulnerabilities of the targeted U.S. companies. So far, there has been no comment from the Chinese government. And last month's parliamentary elections in Iraq has handed a partial victory for Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Baghdad's election commission said Monday Maliki's state-of-the-law alliance took the most number of seats in the Council of Representatives, with 92 of the 328. But it still fell short of a majority, requiring Maliki to win the support of rivals in parliamentary affairs, some of whom oppose a third term for the Iraqi leader. 62% of the 22 million eligible voters cast their ballots in Iraq's first elections since U.S. troop withdrawals in 2011, this according to the Independent High Electoral Commission. And finally, some 4,000 Chinese citizens are said to have left Vietnam on Monday in the midst of anti-Chinese sentiment in the Southeast Asian country. According to various Chinese media, Beijing dispatched 5 ships around noon Sunday, capable of carrying up to 5,000 people. It reported that many of the boarded 4,000 Chinese workers were from a steel plant being built by Formosa Plastics in central Vietnam, where at least one had died and 150 others hurt from violent riots last week.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off in figure skating. Now, South Korea's figure queen Kim Yeon-ha has had her official retirement, but her longtime rival Mao Sada is still uncertain on her future. With an ice show currently taking place at Japan's Tokyo Dome, Mao Sada stated in a press conference that she has decided to rest her body and mind for now before making her decision on her retirement. She added that she will rest for about a year and that she's still 50-50 on whether or not she will retire. Now, the 24-year-old has always been uncertain about her future, even hinting that she might retire after the Sochi Winter Games as well. And now moving over to the LPGA Kingsmill Championship, where South Korea's Park Hee-young was in second place going into the final round, but unfortunately for her, a terrible final round dropped her way down. Despite shooting a 10 under par overall going into the final round, she shoots a 8 over on the final day to drop all the way down to 29th to finish with 2 under overall. Meanwhile, Lizette Salas continues to breeze through the 18 holes of the event, finishing with the title after shooting a 13 under overall. Meanwhile, world number 2 Stacey Lewis finished tied for 12th as she continues to threaten Park Geun-hye's number 1 spot. Now, if you're a fan of the South Korean national football team and plan to cheer for the Taeguk Warriors, good news, the uniform numbers have finally been finalized. Well, not a lot of changes from the previous uniform numbers, as Ki Sung-young gets his usual number 16, with Park Ju-yeon holding on to his number 10 jersey number as well. Son Heung-min, who will sport the number 9 jersey, will probably have one of the more popular jerseys this year, but the highly coveted number 7 jersey went to Kim Bo-kyung of Cardiff City, as many wondered who will wear the same number former captain Park Ji-sung once wore. And now over to the 2014 Women's Asia Cup, where South Korea drew against China 0-0, giving them the first place finish in Group B with 2 wins and 1 draw for a total of 7 points. Now, Korea moves on to the semifinals against Australia, who's ranked 11th in the world. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, a warm start to the day. Morning lows are starting in the mid to upper teens across the region, and it's going to be another summer-like afternoon today here in the capital. But much cooler day is in store for the rest of the country. Now, that's due to showers that are forecast in the southern parts of the peninsula. It will start from Jeju, then spread to the rest of the country, and all the precipitation should go away by the late afternoon. So southern regions can expect to see an overcast skies, and mostly to partly sunny day is in store for the upper parts of the nation today. Now over in Jindo, winds and waves will get tougher today, but the currents in the water will remain week. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 16 and the high will rise to 27, while Daegu will peak at 24 and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 22 and 21 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will reach 21 and 25 later in the day. Dokdo should see a high of 22, while Gangneung tops out at 16. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10.
Well, thank you very much, Jion. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in 30 minutes' time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.